Hello, people. How's it going? Well, being not a Catholic, I know some Catholics, but I'm not a Catholic. Should, I'm going to say Protestant because that's pretty much what it is. Are reading the church fathers, first off, tell you who they are in a little bit. Is it worth studying as a non-Catholic? Should a non-Catholic study the church fathers? Who are these mysterious fathers and why should we bother with them? Sorry. But, I've actually read some of them. Such that I've shown you this book. Excellent book, by the way. This is the second book in the same thing. But who are the church fathers? What do they represent? Why are they called the church fathers? I mean, they did exist. I mean, they did exist. I think it is. I think they are important to study. I mean, they were the founding fathers, if you want to say, of the Catholic Church. And the Catholic Church, well, see, the problem is this is one of the problems that arises. Catholic just means universal church. That's basically what it originally means. So when I say it, I'm not talking about the Roman Catholic Church. That's later. That's created much later. When I use the word Catholic, I mean it for what it actually originally was meant to mean, and that is just basically the universal church. So when I use it, I'm not talking about the Catholic Church we know and we have now, or what it became. Certainly after Constantine, certainly after all those things and after all that. It is an interesting history, which is why I'm bringing this up. The church fathers are usually considered Catholic, and technically they were. I mean, universal church. It was. Remember, this was before it was really organized. It really knew what it wanted to believe, and this, that, and the other. So I'm gonna do some reading. I try to read a lot slower than I normally do, but anyway, this is from this Jerome, Augustine, Basil, Gregory of Nazareth, John Socinium, Gregory of Nyssa, Anthemius, Origen, Theodore of Massacetia, Cyril of Alexandria, Clement of Alexandria, Justin of Murder, Irenaeus, Ambrose, Gregory the Great. For some of us, the names are familiar. Perhaps memories of the past Western civilization or church history course come to your mind. We have read Augustine's Confessions, and I have read Augustine's Confessions, or a section of the City of God, also by Augustine. We have read Augustine against it, yet the passage of time has blurred our memory, or dampened our enthusiasm for personalities in the world of the early church. Maybe our recollections of the past attempts to understand the church father writings discourages us. We recall the desire to explore an early Christian text, yet remember the terrible dullness of plowing through translations that obscure more than open perspectives to us, which is very true, by the way. They had a tendency to be a little ponderous and a little long-winded, and sometimes that makes me sense, and contradict each other and themselves. But they were trying to figure it out. That's why. That's why a lot of it was the way it was. The early church fathers. The early church fathers really is after the death of John the Apostle to about 750 AD. That's kind of the era of the church fathers. I'll get to that part, I promise. Surely there is a reason why Augustine's name keeps turning out in print. On the other hand, too often Augustine's writings in the world remains hidden to us. They'll bind cultural barriers, hermeneutical idiosyncrasies, incomprehensible translations, and David's ability not to talk properly, confusing theological controversies. Well, that will be a test. Same can be said of lesser known personalities such as Jerome or Basil. For others, the church fathers represent a vast unknown, unexplored territory, questions percolate. Was the church father? Did all early Christian leaders receive this designation? If not, how did one qualify to be called a father? Why should we take the time to read them? Were they not all wild allegorizing everything, which, by the way, they did? Okay, it was probably one of the biggest mistakes they kept doing. Sorry, that's my opinion, and that's what I'm reading. Did they really understand the gospel, or did their Greek and Roman background distort the gospel beyond recognition? Yes, for some, and no for others. Church fathers were interesting. They were tackling issues that mattered. They really were trying to figure out things. Once the last apostle died, John, they had to figure all this stuff out on their own. They had to figure out what scriptures were worth keeping. They had to fight against all sorts of heresies, mostly the Gnostics. Can the church fathers be trusted? Protestants, Jewish Christian Protestants, by the way, Protestant readers might be particularly suspicious at this point. They kind of should be, just a little bit. Can the fathers be trusted? Or most of them Roman Catholic or Orthodox? Depending on who you ask, they weren't Orthodox. They weren't right. Anyway, didn't they believe salvation by works? Yes, later. Isn't their understanding of the gospel more Greek or Roman than Christian? Ew. But their world was Roman and Christian. That was part of the problem. They thought more like Greek philosophers. Some of them really did. Some of them was a little too much. Some of them not enough. For many inquirers, the image of a wide-eyed, legalistic, imbalanced, assistic, quickly services permitting suspicion. Well, yeah. That's because, unfortunately, real Christian history is not taught. The world teaches us what Christian history is, and that we can't figure out why people don't want to go to church. Indeed, the trustworthiness of the fathers remains a fundamental question for Christians from many different backgrounds. Will the fathers lead us astray? Did they read the Bible as well? Or did their own cultural and religious blind spots prevent them from clearly comprehending the heart of the gospel? Yes, and no. They were human. They made mistakes. A lot of them really were trying to figure this out. And a lot of them got it right for the most part. A lot of them just went off into allegory heaven. Origen, yeah, that's the man's name, Origen. For many Protestant Christians, there is a deep suspicion that the abuses of the late medieval Roman Catholicism found their seeds in the thoughts of the fathers themselves. Does not Martin Luther himself question what good it does? Martin, you need to learn to speak properly. What good it does to rely on the venerable old fathers who have been approved through such a long succession of ages? Were not they too all equally blind, or rather did they not simply overlook the clearest and most explicit schemes of Paul? Martin Luther, like the fathers, did, however, you have the same Luther who seems to be ready to discard the fathers consistently interacts with them throughout his work. Make up your mind, Martin. Either it's good or it's bad. He was a medieval monk entering the new period. So that's all he had always had was the fathers. He went back to them, I think, in a lot of ways, because I think he was trying to find maybe some grains of truth in what they wrote. Perhaps we're more faithful to Luther if we examine carefully his own methodology and reading the scriptures with his fathers. He is not reluctant to criticize them when he feels they are in error. Simultaneously, though, Luther listens carefully to their voices and praises them when he feels they interpret scripture correctly. And he did. Luther's original idea was not to break away from the Catholic Church. That was not what he was trying to do. He was trying to be a reformer in the church, but the church wasn't going to listen. And he got frustrated. He said, okay, fine. You're not going to listen to me. I'm just going to go from there. That's my next stop. Okay. As the early church pondered the questions of the faith, its thinking coalesced around sexual theological loci. These are the things that the church fathers from 180 to 750 AD were trying to hash out, figure out. What do we believe? Why do we believe it? What is the truth? What is not the truth? What is heresy? What is not heresy? What scriptures should we keep and what scriptures should we throw out? The question of authority. So what should the church look for in guiding authority? What is the relationship between scripture and the apostolic tradition? how the these two relate to one another in the formation of doctrine. Oh, I mean, they didn't just believe something. A lot of them really were trying to figure this out. And yeah, believe me, I can name a few things that they really, 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 really screwed up. That was kicking all the Jewish stuff out. Oh, believe me, by the second century, that might be one of my biggest pet peeves, my biggest problems with the church fathers, is how much effort they put into it to remove as much of Judaism and Jewishness out of the Bible, out of the scriptures as they possibly could. To the point where it no longer was Jewish. It was no longer the gospel brought by a Jewish carpenter named Yeshua. The question of the Trinity: is Christ genuinely divine? If so, how is the divinity of Christ to be understood in relationship to the Father and the Spirit? The question of the Incarnation: what is the relationship between Christ and deity and humanity? If Jesus was truly divine, was he also truly human? How can he be simultaneously both? This is one of the problems with Gnostics. The Gnostics they spiritualize everything. I go to Origin kind of did too. I keep bringing up Origin because Origin taught one thing in public and one thing in private. If you want to understand Origin, read what the Jehovah's Witnesses do. She comes pretty darn close to what they taught. Jesus was a lesser God. He wasn't God. He was a lesser God. He was a created being. And the question of Christ's work. How has Jesus' ministry, death, and resurrection overcome sin and introduced life in the age that comes in this present evil age? The question of humanity. What is a human being? What does the scriptures mean when it states that human beings have been created in the image of God? How, to what extent, has sin affected human nature? They had to figure out what exactly did sin do to the human race. And the church fathers were trying to figure these things out. Yes, they made a lot of mistakes, and they did a lot of dumb things, and they spiritualized too many things away, and they allegorized a whole lot, and they seemed to thought that they were smarter than the scriptures sometimes. And but it's still fascinating. I would still recommend reading the church fathers because you get to understand where they came from and why, and the arguments they would get into, and the minutia they would get into, and just the questions they would ask. They were trying to hold on to the truth the best they could, and a lot of them did that. A lot of them also, unfortunately, created problems that the future we are still dealing with today. Let's see, the question of the church. What is the church? How is the church related to Christ? What is the church's task on earth? How does one enter the church? What are the church's marks? How do you recognize them? How is the life of the church nourished and strengthened? What are the dangers of the church can expect to encounter in its mission and ministry on earth? Tribulation, persecution, having to fight the worldliness that will constantly try to creep in, which, by the way, we have a problem now. The question of the future: what will happen in the future? When will Christ return? What is the resurrection of the dead? What will occur at the last judgment? How shall we work through these questions in this book? In the following pages, I will attempt to accurately guide in the reflections of the church fathers. Bishops, pastors, occasionally lay people who ministered in the church from approximately AD 100 to 7050 AD. That is the time period that most historians give for the church father age. Let's see. The idea of preserving and faithfully passing on the apostles' traditions, I don't know why I need this fancy word, apostles' traditions concerning the meaning of Jesus is clearly evident in the errors of Trinitarian and the Christological controversies. Basically, the Trinity and who was Christ. Was he God? All God? Was he man? Was he all man? Was he God and man? They went through a lot of efforts to figure this out. Bishops who faithfully preserved and protected consular decisions, key councils such as Nicaea, AD 325, 1,000 years ago, Constantinople, 381 AD, and Chalcedon, 451 AD, received the title Father. The Church considered these Christian leaders worthy of special honor and regarded for preserving Orthodox, Orthodox teaching during times marked with severe testing and occasional persecution. Uh, Sorry, in addition, four key criteria are often employed to determine whether a particular Christian teacher qualifies as a father of the church. But you just couldn't be a church father. There were qualifications. You just couldn't show up and say, I'm a church father. I know everything. Couldn't do that. Let's see. Antiquity. A father lived and ministered from roughly the close of the first century AD 96 to the time of John of Damascus 750. Holiness of life. By holiness, we do not mean perfection, as though the fathers were angels of human form. Most, as I have also written, were intensely human and struggled with the same shortcomings and temptations common to humanity. Orthodox doctrines. Since the fathers were teachers of the church, two key points pertain here. First, a father must have left behind a body of teaching, however small it might be. Second, this teaching must line up with the apostles' tradition, basically what's in the New Testament. That is to say, whatever a father says in his teaching must be orthodox or in line with what the apostles themselves taught in the Bible. Many of the topics we will explore with the fathers in this book, and in this one too. This book is also very good. There's a third one. Many of the topics we will explore the fathers in this book: the Trinity, the Incarnation, the absolute authority and fallibility of Scripture, the fallen condition of humanity, and Christ's redemptive death on the cross, are first affirmed and developed doctrinally by people studying the Word, and being, as Boniface Ramsey notes, belief and trust in these essential central doctrines is what precisely sets out a Christian belief from other religious systems. Ecclesiastical approval. Finally, the Church itself must identify and approve teachings and lives of those who receive the designation, Church Father. No one can automatically claim to be the title for himself. He cannot knight himself Church Father. Some highly significant early Christian writers, such as Origen, failed to receive this designation from the church because their positions drifted beyond the boundaries of orthodoxy. Yeah, Origen really did teach Jesus was a created being. He was a little God. He wasn't God. He could not just do it. Anyway, both of these books are very good. I like these books. I like the debates of the early church fathers. Well, I would recommend to read them. You don't have to be Catholic to read them, and you don't have to be Catholic to agree with them. A lot of what the church fathers wrote was good. They were trying to figure it out. They were trying to explain the gospel. They were trying to defend it. They were trying to teach it. They were trying to understand it. A lot of these things, the Trinity and the Incarnation, baffled them. And centuries they've been trying to figure this out. How does this work? How does Jesus, how can he be both God and man at the same time? How? The Trinity. What do you mean God is three, but God is one? These issues drove a lot of them nuts because they really wanted to be correct. And most of them got it correct. A lot of them really tried very hard to get it correct. Did some of them go off course and preach things that were very questionable and never should have been brought up and never should have been preached in the first place, like the Jews are rejected. The early church seemed to become obsessed. With making the Jews out to be no longer important. And we all know the last 2,000 years what that brought out. And includes Martin Luther, who in the beginning did not view the Jews the way he did. It's toward the end. It's sad. It's tragic. But anyway, these two are very good books. They're excellent books. He does have one on. the third book of this trilogy is about prayer of the church fathers. I haven't found that one yet. I'm trying to find that one yet. But I mean, this book does a very good job. I mean, table of contents here. I mean, table of contents. Why read the fathers? The modern mind and biblical interpretation. Who are the fathers? Four doctors of the East. And the Anthemius, Gregory of Nazareth, Basil the Great, and John Chrysostom. The four doctors of the West: Ambrose, Jerome, Augustine, Gregory the Great. The fathers in Scripture: Exodus of Alexandria, exegesis, not reading into the Scripture but reading what it says. The fathers in Scripture: response to Antioch, making sense of past patristic. I can't make this talk normally. See all that? All fascinating. I ain't gonna bother trying to read it. But this book is very good. This is why I think we need a church fathers like anybody, Catholic, non-Catholic, somebody just interested in church history and theology should read these and study them. I mean, there are a lot of good books out there on the early church fathers, on the early church history. Church history is fascinating. It really is. Yeah. Oh, look. You can see that. Oh, you can. Hopefully you can. But yeah, I think that I think it is important. You don't have to agree with them. In fact, it would be better if you didn't agree with everything they wrote, because a lot of what they wrote sometimes was questionable and a little more of an opinion than what the actual scripture said. But that was the point, though. They were trying to figure it out, but also they made their mistakes. Some of them were deliberately making mistakes. There were some. They were part of the problem was they were fighting heresies were popping up everywhere. Gnosticism was not going away. I mean, they were fighting battles within the church and battles outside. And in a lot of ways, I think they did the best they could. I mean, they were fallible human beings, but they're still interesting. What they wrote is interesting. Why they wrote it was interesting. What they put on paper and the councils and it is fascinating. Church history is fascinating. It really can be. And I as much as I don't agree with a lot of what happened in the early church history when it comes to Jews, because I don't, and I never will. But at the same time, understanding why the battles they fought and everything else is still very important to understanding why the church is the way the church is, why the church believes what it believes, and why it doesn't believe it. Why did it take so long for certain books that are in canon now to get there? I mean, Martin Luther did not like the book of James. He did not like the book. He wanted the book of James gone. He was convinced that there was just something wrong with that book. Wrong. And there are books of, I mean, the book of Enoch at one point was considered scripture. I mean, they had to fight against the Gospel of Thomas is nothing but Gnostic heresy. They had to fight against that. That's why the Gospel of John was written, because he was fighting Gnosticism. It is all history is fascinating to me. This is history. I enjoy it. I think that a person should read the church fathers because if you want to understand why and how the church got where it got, the battles it was fighting, the personalities, and all the councils, and the arguments, and having to deal with the Roman Empire at the same time, which off and on persecuted them, not a whole lot. They kind of viewed them as, well, yeah, you're a problem, but you're not a big problem yet. But anyway, I think babbling for 25 minutes. But anyway, listen, I think reading the church fathers is a good idea. Whether you're a Protestant, Catholic, or somewhere in the middle, like me, Jewish Christian, they're worth reading because it helps you understand. Helps you understand the early church, what they were going through. It couldn't have been easy. It wasn't easy. They had a lot of conflicts. But anyway, thank you for watching. I appreciate it. That person who keeps coming on and off. Hello, how are you doing? No questions? Hello, questions? Anyone? Before I log off. I just want to sit here and stare at that one person. They left. I don't know. I'm easy to talk to. I really am. I'm not ranting and raving about politics. Anyway. Anyway, it's worth the effort. Like, subscribe, comment, share. Thanks for watching. Behave yourselves, people, because you knew I'm not going